Hey guys, it's Steve here again from Charlie Noise Collectibles. Just got a little mail day video. Just picked these up from the post office just now. I missed them yesterday because I was at work. This is all stuff for my personal collection I've sort of accumulated over the last kind of month or so. Same buyer, same seller. I'm obviously the same buyer. And it's mostly stuff that I'm going to stick in my own sort of personal collection. A lot of it is vintage, which I love. You can possibly think, well, I don't know, you can think for that. I just like the feel and the texture of the old cards. I like the art of the old cards. And I'm a set collector at heart as well. And the vintage stuff, there's something to be said for. There's something to be said for, getting hold of something that's difficult to attain. I think it was Mason in one of his videos the other day from Cardinal Gaming had said, the older something is, the harder it is to obtain. And I think that's particularly true in the collectible card industry because once they're out of print, that's it. There's a finite number of them in the world, and I'm not alone in thinking that they're neat and that I want to own them. And I was also sort of fairly late to the party, right? And I started collecting, I started playing and collecting Magic in 2018-ish, 2017, Ixalan kind of era. Basically when Arena was in, when it was on its beta run, sort of got into it and then started collecting the physical editions of the sets that were on there. So it was like Ixalan, Core 19, Dominaria. It was actually through collecting Dominaria that I found Rudy, actually. I was I was a bit gawed at how expensive Magic the Gathering was to obtain in any sort of quantity. And I was investigating whether it would be cheaper to pick up a booster box of Dominaria versus just buying the individual cards that I want for my own collection kind of thing. And through that, I was investigating so what the likelihood of getting the cards that I was missing were. If I sort of bought a box, would it be the better option? And through that, I found Alpha Investments kind of box opening videos, and thus began a long and fabled story of singles collection, yes, but also sealed Magic the Gathering investment. Anyway, I do from there have gotten into vintage Magic the Gathering, starting with Revised, which I finally finished my near mint set of revised cards earlier this year, and the Dark, the cheap ones, the ones that kind of boomed during COVID, and have since then settled. And from there, I've kind of moved on to, what else you got kind of thing. So looking at Legends at the moment, which is what this binder is over here. So I'm in the process of kind of building that set out. So anything that you see today, there's not a lot of high-end stuff. Most of it's just minnows because I'm missing most of the set still anyway. So, got to get them when they pop up kind of thing. So, and then I've got a couple of other bits and bobs sort of stuck in here. So this is obviously from the Warhammer collector decks. You can see it's got this sort of surge foiling. I think they're neat. They're kind of unique, and I think they'll speak to anybody who has gotten into Magic the Gathering, off the back of these commander decks and the universes beyond. So when these pop up cheaply, I'll usually sort of pick them up with a view to sort of seeing what they do. I don't really have any intention of using them or whatever. It's just a bit of a hold, and if they go up in price, then maybe I'll stick them on the storefront and recoup a bit of the money for the they've spent on stuff that I actually want, which I think is a good way to do it, to be honest, because let's face it is an expensive hobby. So anyway, we've got the Mask of Memory here and Space Marine Devastator. I don't know if we can see that foiling on there, sort of. Bit of reserve list stuff as well. That's another binder over in the office. I've already got a copy of Hatred, but I like to have two. Yeah, so this one sort of showed up and was in good nick. And I think it sort of bears speaking about as well. I know Rudy's been sort of saying lately that he's not seeing any movement in the vintage and reserve list market, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. It was, after probably going into sort of late 2022 and 2023, around about the time that, just the collapse in general in Magic, the Innistrad, Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow sort of era where people just got a bit sick of it. It was all overprinted. They keep sort of releasing the same sort of set over and over. Well, not so much the same set, but obviously they had double feature, but which wasn't well received at all. But the same sort of theme, same sort of flavor, and it was a little bit stale. I think people were looking for something a little bit more. And ultimately, when Kamigawa Neon Dynasty came out, that was well received, but ultimately sort of overprinted. And I think you saw a real decline in the interest in vintage. Vintage and reserve list Magic the Gathering had absolutely boomed over COVID. Whopping great spike in all the prices on basically everything from the reserve list. Even just completely unplayable stuff. People just wanted to have a position in it on the off chance that things had sort of gone up. I think there's a lot of capital thrown about because people were just stuck at home, and it just seemed like something to do. Unfortunately, I'd sort of gotten in a little bit before that, so I had a lot of the stuff that I already wanted anyway. But for somebody who was already collecting into revised at the time, it really didn't help me fill out the set because the prices went absolutely wild, like tripling in price on certain cards over that period. And if you want them, you just got to pay the price. That is how it is. You can wait, but ultimately, when a price settles back down again after a boom, if you don't settle all the way. And I guess that sort of brings me to what I wanted to talk about today, and I'll probably sort of investigate doing a longer video on it in a little while. But I actually think we've reached a low point for vintage cards and Magic and reserve list cards. I feel like if you jump on MTG Goldfish, if you jump on MTG stocks and have a look at the interests, periodically certain reserve list cards are spiking, but routinely, your daily interests will feature quite a few Arabian Nights, quite a few antiquities, and increasingly so quite a few Legends cards. So I feel like it's going to be following the same sort of pattern as what happened when I was after revised. Sorry, that I think if you want them, you have to get in now. I don't think they're going to go lower, and I think it's just a matter of time before the eyes are turned on to vintage and Four Horsemen set Magic the Gathering, and these prices are going to go through the roof. We've had a lot of Poke Bros kind of come over to Magic the Gathering and buying up a lot of the collector boxes. I feel like, yes, there's room to run. I feel like, yes, there's room to run in certainly in certain sets that have been overlooked. But one day, and I would argue one day soon, a lot of these people are going to realize that the prices have increased so much that their potential return on investment is not going to be what they're after. And they're going to start looking elsewhere. And I think they're going to, like everybody else who gets into collecting Magic the Gathering, they're going to very shortly discover vintage and reserve list. And I feel like this stuff is going to run. It is going to go. So I'm feverishly trying to buy up all these cards while I can, because I feel like once they go, it's going to be a couple of years before the interest wanes and they and they sink back down in price. And I feel like, you know, a lot of the high end, you know, sort of top end Legends cards are just going to be out of reach for somebody with kind of humble capital and humble resources like myself, you know. So anyway, my plan currently, fill out the set with you know, the cheaper sort of stuff, literally simply because it's cheaper, and then sort of aim to buy one of the sort of more expensive cards once a fortnight, once a month, you know, whatever I can afford to do. And in this particular week, it was this one here, Field of Dreams. I haven't unpackaged him yet, but you know, I think I spent 160 on that Australian, but it should be nice and fresh and minty and crispy. Hang on, let's move these guys up with their friends up here. Picked up a couple of copies of Ritual of the Machine. This was another card that spiked during COVID, and is sort of reasonably cheap at the moment. I got these for like $3 a pop. I like them. I think they're worth having. They'll just go in my other binder. We've got Elven Riders, which is maybe a tenner or something. Forsaken Wastes, I never actually picked this up prior to now. The price has come down a little bit, obviously, with Valgavoth and it's called Duskmorn. The price on that went through the roof. So it was nice to see that it's sort of come down to something a little bit more affordable and more appropriate now. I've got beautiful addition of Seeking's Blessing here. It's very clean. It's nice. Let's leave all these up and pop them in their little house shortly. I don't know if you'd be interested in that. Yeah, maybe I'll pop that into a separate video. There's a little blemish on this, a little bit of a bend in it, unfortunately. Oh, it do be like that sometimes. And then Reincarnation. So yeah, like I say, nothing too exciting. And then I've got a couple of things that they're cheap now, but once upon a time they weren't. And I feel like Magic's kind of really sort of started to figure out its reprint policy. They haven't done a master set in a little while. And so obviously Innistrad Remastered, they reprinted the Captivating Vampire. Indomitable Creativity was in Thunder Junction with the Breaking News subset. And then Polluted Bonds, I think it was a rarity play initially. It was in Shadowmoor, I want to say. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But all cards that once upon a time held a lot of value. And that value has been crushed by the reprint. And that's just something I like to do. Bit of a speculative play on the off chance that maybe it'll go through the roof. Well, sort of the desirability of the individual card will have those prices climb again in price. So, you know, if you've got a handful of them that you've paid $3 for and they go up to $20, then, you know, it's free money. You know, you don't really have to do much to cash in on that stuff. You know, personally speaking, it's worked for Starfield of Nyx. It's worked for Entomb. I feel like it's in the process of working for Sliver Hive Lord. I've done it with a few others. But yeah, you know, stuff that's playable across multiple decks and but potentially niche, I suppose. Entomb, not niche, but you know, it sees a lot of sort of vintage and legacy play. But there we go, another Surge foil from the Warhammer 40k decks. And then we're back into the Legends again. Backdraft. Great Defender. Yeah, so like I say, nothing too exciting outside of the Field of Dreams. Like, this all sort of minnows. But hey, if you want the set, mate, you gotta get these too. You know, if you're a trader and you actually sort of work in, you know, or own a retail outlet store sort of thing, then oh my god, the back of that is, it's very matte, shall we say. It's I think it's in a bit of table play. But a couple of revised Sarah Angels there. You know, that you buy collections and these things kind of come in there and you don't necessarily have to pay for them. But, you know, somebody like myself, I'm not picking up too many collections that have a bunch of legends in them. You know what I mean? So yeah, people got them, people list them. You gotta buy them. But like I say, I feel like our days of getting these easily limited. Yeah, and so I'm moving now while I can. And if you're interested in it, I thoroughly suggest that you do the same, because I don't think it's going to be too long before these these do a revised during COVID, or the Dark as well. The Dark was another set that kind of happened to. It's Brian Hagg's having a struggle. It's wet or something. It's got a bit of a sort of warp in the top end and back in front. A pretty played. I might have to pick up another copy of that. I don't know if I'm happy with that one. Alcor's Tomb, another reserve list card. Doesn't see a lot of play, but again, reserve list once the eyes go back on it, and it will. I don't think it can go back onto it in the at the same time that things are moving with Modern. I feel like the money will move out of Modern. People will realize that it's I wouldn't argue that it's overpriced, but it's correctly priced, if you will. And once that starts to retrace, then eyes are going to start looking at Vintage again, and that's when this stuff's going to move. So whether that happens, I don't think it'll happen this year. Probably not next year either. But you can see, like, day to day, there's little nibbles. I might jump on onto Goldfish later, and we can go through the graphs, and you can see, not every card yet, but a lot of the more playable ones, people have started to take a renewed interest in, and those prices are starting to head north. Yeah. Anyway, we'll wrap up here. I will do I think a more in-depth sort of look at revised and vintage, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with sort of clearer visuals in an upcoming video. But for the time being, I think that is us. I'll spend my evening kind of sleeving these fellas up and getting them back into the binder, and yeah, it is pretty clean. Yeah, nice. That's good. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this one as well. Yeah, sort of Judge Promo Deranged Hermit. Again, squirrels out of the public eye at the moment, but they come back. They release a Modern Horizons that's sort of squirrel heavy, or there's Lorwyn coming out. I mean, fairies, forestry sort of stuff. There's nothing to say that there's not going to be squirrels in there. And I think this lad's going to run again, just like he does every time. But I don't have a copy of this yet, so now I do. And into the vault it goes, for me to look at later, I suppose. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.